It's the guitarist who said no to Steely Dan. I'm John Bowden from Rock History Music. There's a brand new book out called Domenic Troiano, His Life and His Music, written by his brother Frank Troiano and Frank Doble. Now, here's a guy who was a big part of the beginning of rock and roll in Canada with the Mavericks. He replaced Joe Walsh and the James Gang and was the guitarist on the last two Guess Who albums. But at one point, he had to say no to Steely Dan. Remember, if you want to see this whole interview, there'll be links in the description of this video. With Steely Dan, it's interesting. First of all, he joins the James Gang. Dominic joins, and he's dedicated to that. He's committed himself to that. But replacing Joe Walsh, Tommy Bolin replaces your brother. I mean, that again, you got to do the work to be surrounded by that kind of stuff. But I'm overstating the obvious. But it's interesting that that Steely Dan gig. You look at that, and for a split second, I look at alternate universes, and I'm going, you can't help but go, what could have been? You never know.
Yeah. And I've thought about that too. Dominic and I, we talked about that in the late 90s, and he was invited to join Steely Dan on not one, but two occasions. One, the first time he had just made a commitment to the James Gang. And then 2 years later, after Denny Diaz left the band, or Steely Dan, they called him up again. And he had just made a commitment to join the Guess Who. And Dominic, he once he made a commitment, he was going to stick to it. And what you think musically, how incredible a fit that would have been. And I think it would have been musically, it would have been phenomenal. Practically, however, I look at them and I think to myself, like Fagan and Becker, the leaders of Steely Dan, their standards, they had their own ideas, and they were going to have, it was going to be their way or the highway. And to a large extent, that was very true of Donnie as well. And I'm just wondering if that third leader in the band, if they would have, how long it would have lasted, because I think they would have come to some kind of conflict. Not that any of them were wrong. It's just they were all very, very strong-willed. And when any group that Donnie was in, even if he was only 16 years old, he was the leader of the band. He was doing all the arrangements. He was writing all the music, and he had definite ideas. It's why he walked away from Rompin' Ronnie Hawkins, a very lucrative gig for a 16-year-old kid, but it wasn't the music he wanted to do. And he was determined to follow his muse, if you will.
What was the process like for both of you putting this together?
Go ahead,
Go
Frank.
ahead, Mark.
Okay, it was interesting. We kind of mapped out a plan. I was going to sort of draft the narrative, if you will, what Dominic did, who he played with, what they recorded, talk about the recordings, and all of this stuff. Frank was reaching out to well over 200 people, as you can see. I think we got 185 different folks giving us submissions, and essentially we would take whatever they wanted to say, and we would insert that into the narrative. And what we really tried to do was, where somebody came along and said something that I had said, we used their words, because in fairness, they were there, I wasn't, and to be able to use their words and to allow them to tell the story. That's the nuts and bolts way that we kind of put it together to see if that would work. Somebody said to us very early on, this reads kind of like a Wikipedia piece. Well, that's exactly right, because we have all of these different insertions. But the other part of this was, we really wanted to have this book be a platform for all of these folks, to give them their chance to tell the story and to pay tribute. And people still wanted to do it. 15 years after his passing, they were still eager to do that. And so that was humbling for us to be able to do. So in fairness, although Frank and I are the co-authors of this book, we really have about 185 other co-authors.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And Frank, it being your brother, I mean, and it's close to home. Did it bring, it must have brought back an awful lot of things for you.
It was a really, I have to say, it was a cathartic experience, John. I'll just give my 25 cents worth about how the book got started. In March of 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, I looked at the calendar and I saw that the 15th anniversary of my brother's death was coming up in May of 2020, a couple of months later. And I said to myself, I was going back and forth a few times to do a book. And anyhow, it was overwhelming. But like Mark said, I reached out to about 300 people in March. I sent out about several group emails, and I got back a good response in the first week, about 6 or 7 really heartfelt tributes. And I said, you know what, maybe I could make this work. And then Mark reached out to me. He was on my list. Mark was a friend of my brother's and a super Guess Who fan. And he reached out to me and said, Frank, would you like some help? And of course I needed help to put something like this. This is a big undertaking, what we had to do. And so we worked, I have to say, kudos to Mark. We worked like a great team and we complemented each other. I was out there hustling quotes, doing interviews. Mark was weaving the narrative. I mean, I was submitting different things of my life, but he was weaving the narrative while I was doing that other part. And I was setting up interviews. Mark interviewed 5 or 6 people that I kind of set up, and it was great. And Mark is a great interviewer as well. And anyhow, it all came together about a year later, I guess. And now we're in this long process of promoting the book and selling it. And it's been a wonderful, anyhow, getting back to it, it was a very emotional thing for me because of my brother, of course, losing my brother at a pretty early, at 59 years of age. And it allowed me to relive my youth, all the beautiful memories I had of my brother and my family. And it sort of tied in a lot of stuff. And it really, I did cry a few times. When I started reading some of the tributes, it was very emotional.
I think it was cool too that your sister was involved, because it's kind of like a family affair. You have, it's full circle as far as people, giving their input, which gives more of a human aspect to who he was. The brand new book is by Mark Doble and Domenic Troiano's brother, Frank. Mark was actually a good friend of Dominic's. There'll be links in the description if you want to pick up the book. If you want to see the entire interview, there'll be links in the description as well. We'll have more from the pair in just a few days. Make sure you comment on our videos. Share our videos on social media. That's the biggest thing that helps us. Share, share, share. And of course, subscribe to our channel. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Music. Take care of yourself.